Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks. Welcome back, everybody. Happy Memorial Day. And on that note, let me start with a little Second Amendment news. This so-called big, beautiful bill that Donald Trump, of course, enjoys and is pushed through, and I think rightfully so. There are some individuals, of course, who are dissenting from this, and they don't like it. However, as it turns out, hidden within this bill is a massive Second Amendment victory having to do with silencers and how silencers can't be taxed, and there's no longer a waiting period for silencers or suppressors, quote unquote, as people will call them. And again, this is a good thing. Again, shall not be infringed means just that. And as it turns out, unfortunately, this bill might not end up passing, but we shall see. There are plenty of senators apparently who are not in favor of this. It may even need a J.D. Vance tie-breaking vote. But anyway, regarding this particular portion, I should say, of this bill regarding suppressors, it says the following. And this specifically, I should say, was from DefiantAmerica.com. It says that the bill passed by a razor-thin margin of 215 to 214. It says the Hearing Protection Act, tucked inside this mammoth legislation, fully removes suppressors from the NFA's grasp. It says that means no more $200 transfer tax, no more 8 to 10 month waits for ATF approval, no more treating a device designed to protect hearing like a machine gun. As a backup under the Byrd Rule, which governs reconciliation bills, the amendment also slashes the transfer and making tax to $0. Says it's a 1-2 punch that could redefine how Americans access suppressors, and it's happening without a Supreme Court showdown. It says for those unfamiliar with the suppressor saga, the American Suppressor Association lays it out starkly. To legally buy or own a suppressor, you currently need to be at least 21 or 18 in some cases, pass a BATFE background check that drags on for months, pay that infamous $200 tax, and live in one of the 42 states that allow civilian ownership. It's a process that deters all but the most determined, turning a tool for hearing protection into a bureaucratic nightmare. And let's be clear, suppressors aren't silent movie props. They reduce gunshot noise by 20 to 35 decibels, a critical difference in a life or death scenario where every second counts, and every sound could mean permanent hearing loss. The victory didn't come easy, as Guns.com reports the original bill only nibbled at the edges, proposing to reduce the transfer tax to $0, but the passed amendment goes nuclear, deleting the NFA's regulations surrounding suppressors entirely. So I'll basically put it this way, even though it seems insignificant, or a great deal of people, and of course endless individuals, as you know on the left, would say, well, why do you need one of those? Well, what's the point? Well, those are the same people, of course, who are not gun owners, so they wouldn't understand. Not to mention they're incapable of putting themselves in particular situations or scenarios where having one of those would be a good thing, certainly for home defense. Somebody breaks into your house, you start popping off rounds, you're not going to grab, your earmuffs or put in earplugs and then grab your gun and then, hunt whoever it is that's breaking into your home or has broken into your home. You just want to be able to grab a gun and go. And yeah, if you can shoot without, of course, needing hearing protection, and then, of course, being able to still shoot and then hear what's coming at you from another angle, that's a good thing. Again, ultimately, it's about self-defense. So I'm all for it. We know that government doesn't want that. They want to tax our self-defense as much as humanly possible and limit our ability to defend ourselves as much as humanly possible, certainly given multiple scenarios, and that's why they do what they do. But what's interesting about this bill, sort of as a broader picture here, is there has been opposition to it. Thomas Massie voted no in the House of Representatives, and so did Warren Davidson, as it turns out, and he's our representative here in Southwest Ohio. So why is it that that would be the case? Well, again, there's numerous lobbies, of course, associated with these bills. There's a number of different things, I think, taking place inside of this bill. But at the same time, it's quite possible that it's also just good old-fashioned blackmail. Again, if these individuals were, say, a Mitch McConnell or a Susan Collins or a Lisa Murkowski in the Senate, and of course they didn't want to vote for it, then everybody would be screaming and shouting. But again, these individuals exist in the House of Representatives, and it begs the question why. So I bounced over to Ariel's account here, and Josiah Richwine sent me this post. And, I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, I wouldn't doubt that Massey's blackmailed to some extent. He might be. I mean, yeah, he's called out the Jewish lobby, which is great, and he's been doing that now for quite some time. But even so, it doesn't mean that, some people don't have their hooks in them, and certainly from a money perspective. But either way, here's what Ariel said just the other day regarding Thomas Massey. He said, quote, "Do you want Thomas Massey for 2028? Again, this is all speculation. I have no proof, but it's thought-provoking. It says a point-by-point presentation to show you that's not a good idea. Point 1, 2020 election fraud complicity. The betrayal. Massey's refusal to challenge the 2020 election results despite widespread fraud allegations is a cowardly capitulation to globalist overlords, undermining American sovereignty. His letter, with 6 Republicans dismissing Congress's role, reeks of orchestrated deflection." He then says evidence. The 2020 internal GOP memo linked to a conservative research network reveals Massey was pressured by McConnell-aligned donors, same state, Kentucky, to avoid election challenges, with promises of committee placements. His vote to certify Biden's election despite Kentucky's Trump loyalty contradicts his constitutional conservative quote-unquote branding. A 2021 X post from a Kentucky voter archived by investigators accuses Massey of ignoring local poll watcher testimonies about ballot irregularities. Massey's claim that Congress lacks authority to overturn elections is a legal cop-out, ignoring evidence of mail-in ballot fraud cited in his own 2021 statement. His silence on Dominion voting systems despite tech expertise suggests he's hiding something. Point 2, the Take It Down Act. It says 2020 guest list from a D.C. gala uncovered a private investigator places Massey alongside a financier linked to Epstein's New York operations. His vote against the Take It Down Act, which targeted deepfake exploitation, aligns with protecting elite tech moguls implicated in child exploitation, per a 2024 whistleblower report from a Silicon Valley insider. A 2025 X post accuses Massey of ignoring child trafficking concerns in Kentucky, though unverified. Epstein's network relied on political cover, with congressmen often wined and dined to ensure silence. Massey's tech background and patent wealth make him a prime candidate for elite recruitment. His libertarian privacy quote-unquote stance conveniently dovetails with shielding digital platforms used for exploitation. Point 3. Massey, the tech-savvy fraud, runs a crypto Ponzi scheme laundering millions through blockchain wallets to bankroll foreign anti-American plots. His libertarian quote-unquote love of Bitcoin is a rancid cover for fleecing patriots and funneling cash to enemies. A 2024 blockchain audit conducted by a private cyber investigator and shared in a restricted Telegram channel traces $3.2 million in Bitcoin from Massey-linked wallets to a Seychelles-based exchange tied to Chinese state operatives. The wallets activated in 2023 correlate with Massey's sudden push for crypto deregulation, per a 2025 dark web financial leak. Massey's MIT degree and haptic tech patents prove he's no crypto novice. He's a mastermind exploiting blockchain's anonymity. His silence on China's digital yuan, despite railing against fiat, betrays his paymasters. The Seychelles exchange was flagged in a 2025 Interpol memo for funding anti-Western propaganda uncovered by a hacker collective. Point 4. Kentucky's drug lord enabler. The parasite. It says, Massey is a silent partner of Kentucky's meth and fentanyl lords, pocketing bribes to let his district drown in poison. His rural values, quote-unquote, are a sick charade, profiting from death. A 2024 Kentucky Sheriff's report, suppressed but leaked to a local investigative blog, details a fentanyl pipeline through Boone County, with a prominent congressional ally blocking raids. A 2025 wiretap transcript obtained by a private investigator captures a drug runner bragging about a DC guy with patents, quote unquote, ensuring protection. Massey's campaign received $100,000 in 2024 from a trucking firm tied to this pipeline, per a dark web audit. Kentucky's drug crisis kills thousands yearly, yet Massey ignores it, focusing on DC stunts. His judge executive past gave him ties to local power brokers perfect for brokering deals with traffickers. His silence on border security, despite fentanyl's Mexican origins, is complicity. It says, "This is just the start. I will expose more." Again, I wouldn't put it past Massey or any other politician, again, to be squeezed from one angle or another to not vote for a particular thing. I mean, Donald Trump's called him out in the past and said he's a grandstander and he's just doing this and he's just doing that. He's clearly not a fan of Massey's. I don't think it's because Massey's called out the Jewish lobby. That's probably not it. I think Donald Trump knows that they're the problem too. But again, Massey's take on a number of things always has to do with spending. So the question that basically I've always had regarding Massey is does Massey know the larger plan? Does he know the bigger picture here, that ultimately the Fed will cease to exist, that the Treasury is the one that will take over, of course, all of the money, and that we actually don't have the debt that we actually have? Again, if he's basing his decisions on believing that the debt clock is real and that we, again, are accumulating all of this debt, then I guess from that angle, it would certainly make sense that he wouldn't want to vote for any kind of a bill that would, of course, cost money, certainly down the line. But even so, if the debt clock is fake and we actually have more cash on hand and are actually in the black as a nation as opposed to being in the red, and Massey doesn't know this, well, then, therein lies a bit of his problem as well. Same thing with Warren Davidson. I mean, I don't know how awake Warren Davidson is to, again, the bigger picture of what's actually happening here. Again, there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of possible scenarios, and as we know, blackmail and business blackmail is certainly one of them. So I wouldn't put it past Massey that would be the case. Turning a blind eye as a politician, when, of course, you're promised particular things, is probably a rather easy thing to do. But again, it takes a certain kind of individual to do that, of course, and sadly, that's the game. So I'm not sure I have a ready explanation for it, but I wouldn't put it past him, again, to turning a blind eye on particular things, certainly at a local level, in order to just, again, make it look like he's ahead of the curve at the DC level, so to speak. So I'm not sure. I wouldn't put it past him again. Just good old-fashioned blackmail is one of the tools that always gets used. So it's highly possible. With that said, let me move on to this, and I want to spend just a little time on this. This was interesting. And I have to tell you, I read this document, and it almost reads like it's basically about me. And I know that that's selfish, and I don't mean it that way, but it basically reads like it's kind of written about all of us, for the most part, certainly this listening audience. This had to do with the Office of National Intelligence here, and Tulsi Gabbard declassifying this document that was titled "Domestic Violent Extremists and Foreign Analogs May React Violently to COVID-19 Mitigation Mandates." Now, this was an article that was put together on December 13th of 2021, and they specifically highlight, certain activities certainly throughout 2020, but they hone in on the month of August of 2021 as being where these violent extremists, quote unquote, are saying that COVID vaccines are killing people. Now, we all know someone who, of course, spoke publicly about how the vaccines, quote unquote, would kill people. Certainly in the month of August of the year 2021, 4 years ago. So let me do this first real quickly. Let me read Catherine Herridge's post about this, and then I want to get into some of the actual details that are inside this document. Again, it's not a long PDF. It's about 7 pages long. But I find it funny, again, on the actual topics that they hone in on. And then again, it basically reads like they listen to this show. Like they were listening to this show back in 2021 or even before that. But anyway, Catherine Herridge said the following. Biden administration labeled opponents of COVID mandates as domestic violent extremists, newly released documents show. It says the designation infringed on the First Amendment and opened the door to investigate Americans for vaccine mandate skepticism. I'll basically put it this way. As I've said before, if you're not on an FBI list, you're doing something wrong. These people have to have my name. They have to. I have to be on some list somewhere. And frankly, I just love it. I mean, it makes me smile and laugh all the time. I just think they actually went out of their way to paint me and endless other Americans and people around the world as being nut jobs when in fact we were right. Anyway, it goes on. It says the Biden administration labeled Americans who oppose the COVID-19 vaccination and mask mandates as domestic violent extremists, quote unquote, or DVEs, according to a newly declassified intelligence record obtained by Public and Catherine Herridge reports. So Schellenberger and another group got a hold of it also. Of course, it's on the DNI's website, and you can immediately look it up and download it. Again, it's a 7-page PDF is all. It doesn't have any names listed in it, but there are some redactions. It says the report with the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, has declassified claims that anti-government and anti-authority violent extremists, quote unquote, specifically militias, characterize COVID-19 vaccination and mask mandates as evidence of government overreach, quote unquote. A sweeping range of COVID narratives, the report states, have resonated with domestic violent extremists motivated by QAnon. It's just too good. This is too good. It says the FBI Department of Homeland Security, DHS, and the National Counterterrorism Center, NCTC, co-authored the December 13th, 2021 intelligence product whose title reads, DVEs and foreign analogs may react violently to COVID-19 mitigation mandates. So basically, if you were out there on social media, which back then you would have had to have probably been on Gab or another platform of some kind, BitChute, what have you, and you were even Telegram, and you're out there, of course, or if, of course, you have, a show or a Substack or anything, and you're basically saying Fauci needs to be hanged, all of these doctors pushing the shots need to go to jail, I was kicked out of a hospital, or I did this, or I did that, or, we're going to break my family member out of the hospital, or whatever else, then all of a sudden, again, you're a domestic terrorist. A domestic violent extremist. There we go. It goes on, it says, quote, it's a way they could go to social media companies and say, you don't want to propagate domestic terrorism, so you should take down this content, said former FBI agent Steve Friend. Premium content, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so here's the document. And again, it's funny. And it reads almost like, again, they've listened to this show or shows like it, or again, anybody out there who's ever, told the truth and told their opinion about what was really going on at the time. It says NCTC, DHS, and FBI assess that some domestic violent extremists and their foreign analogs will threaten or mobilize to violence in opposition to new or expanding COVID-19 related mandates. In 2020, DVEs, domestic violent extremists, threatened or plotted violence against the healthcare sector and state and local government officials. Since the advent of COVID-19 vaccines, DVEs have expanded their potential target set to include federal government officials, healthcare workers, or others who enforce vaccination mandates or participate in vaccination efforts. We anticipate that the threat will continue at least into the winter, as many of the new COVID-19 mandates in the United States and some other Western countries are implemented, including U.S. workplace vaccination policies that carry disciplinary or termination penalties. Again, they're also lumping this with January 6th. And they're basically saying, see all those people over there, all those terrorists, all of those so-called terrorists over there, well, they're exactly who would do something like this. They would kill doctors, like Ted Kaczynski style with, mailbox bombs and anthrax and envelopes and whatever else. These people are nuts. I mean, again, any comments that we were making online were about holding people accountable. It wasn't about vigilante murder. We weren't saying, let's go kill Anthony Fauci, hang him by the neck, until dead and blah, blah, blah. I mean, yes, that's what we wanted, but we weren't going to do it. I mean, we just weren't. We were going to wait it out, use the law as our defense, which we did, And then all the cowards ended up backing down. And then, of course, more people doubled and tripled up on shots. And again, I've made this point before, and you're well aware of this, but when the first shot came out, and even again back in 2020 before the shots came out, there was endless discussion online about there being at least 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 shots, that this was going to be a first time ever rollout of how you have to take multiple shots in order to somehow prevent something. And that couldn't be more clear that it was a depopulation agenda. I mean, it couldn't be more obvious. When has that ever happened before? Even now, with the multi-shots that exist, again, when you walk into a Walmart or you walk in anywhere, it says, get your COVID, your flu, your RSV, your shingles, your this, your that, and it tells everybody to get them all at the same time. They've never done that before. That's never existed. The simple fact that they were openly talking about that being the thing that everybody should do should have been the first major red flag for anybody when it came to putting needles in their arms. It's just nuts. Here's the first bullet point. It says, in the United States, we have observed at least a handful of identified anti-government or anti-authority violent extremists. They even have an entire acronym for that. AGAAVEs, they call them. Specifically, militia violent extremists, or MVEs, characterize COVID-19 vaccination and mask mandates as evidence of government overreach. Well, it was. Again, couldn't be more obvious. You don't have to be a violent person or even talk about violence even casually or jokingly to recognize that it was government overreach. But the date where they hone in here is very interesting. Since August of 2021, it says, some of these MVEs have called for violence against medical or pharmaceutical employees, mobile vaccine clinics, elected or public health officials, federal agencies, and law enforcement officers, according to FBI information. I don't remember threatening to kill law enforcement or even doctors. I just remember saying, why is Anthony Fauci still being believed? I mean, everybody wanted him dead. I don't know anybody who didn't. It says some RMVEs, driven by a belief in the superiority of the white race, have claimed that there is a conspiracy among Jews or other minorities to mass murder white people through vaccinations, according to FBI information. Again, do they listen to the show? It sounds like they're an audience member. It's true, by the way. Depopulation again. You know this. Depopulation is a real thing. It's been written about for centuries. It's not new. It's only new to the people who are dead asleep. This is amazing. It says since July of 2021, RMVEs in the United States, Australia, France, Greece, and Italy have plotted or threatened violence against government officials, law enforcement officers, and healthcare workers, according to, redacted, U.S. military reporting, FBI information, and open source reporting. Again, a lot of these paragraphs are referenced by something, so they have to be attached to either a name or a location or something. The next one says this: a range of narratives about COVID-19 have resonated with MVEs, RMVEs, and DVEs motivated by QAnon, compounding the view that COVID-19 mandates justify violent responses. No. First of all, there's no QAnon. That doesn't exist. There's Q and Anons. And Q posts were openly talking about how COVID is fake. And it couldn't be more obvious. In one instance, again, when the cameras are turned on, all the people in the media are wearing their masks. When the cameras are turned off, they take their masks off. Again, this was obvious. You didn't even need to read Q posts to figure that out. But again, they were clearly using it to control people, which means when the needles came out, what were you thinking? What was anybody thinking? It goes on here. It says prominent narratives include the belief that COVID-19 vaccines are unsafe, especially for children, are part of a government or global conspiracy to deprive individuals of their civil liberties and livelihoods, or are designed to start a new social or political order, unquote. Yeah. Yes. These people are so dumb that, again, this is one of the easiest ways to spot evil, is they write these articles assuming that what they're writing people are somehow going to read and actually believe it, when in fact, in the article themselves, they're exposing the truth of their plan. They do this all the time. Again, it's psychological projection. They're telling everybody what they actually plan on doing, but they're essentially twisting it and making it sound like that this is completely inconceivable, that there's no way that this could actually happen, that depopulation isn't a real thing, and how dare you believe such a thing? Again, it couldn't be more obvious. It goes on here, it says, we assess that the controversy surrounding vaccination mandates for school-aged children, employees facing termination for lack of compliance, or perceptions of unfair healthcare treatment for the unvaccinated might trigger increased violence by DVEs, their foreign analogs, or other violent actors. Given these conditions, DVEs would most likely plot violent acts, to intimidate healthcare workers and officials charged with implementing COVID-19 mitigation measures, as well as possibly killings or kidnappings of state, local, or federal government personnel, similar to plotting that has occurred recently in the United States, France, and Italy, judging from State Department, FBI, and open source information. And then it goes even, again, more into schools. Now, let me spend a second on that paragraph real quick. First of all, the real plan, as it's been laid out and as we are aware, the long-term plan with the shots, if Hillary Clinton had won, was to go door to door, to basically make it so that you could not leave your property if you did not inject yourself. This was their plan. And this is what Operation Warp Speed, of course, having multiple meanings, this is what Operation Warp Speed sought to speed up. It sought to speed up the bad guys' plans, because that was written down someplace, which is why, again, directors of national intelligence, military officials, you name it, they knew exactly what these individuals had planned for us. Again, they would kill anybody who got in their way. Supreme Court judges, dead. You get in our way, you die. Law enforcement, you get in our way, you die. Sheriffs, you get in our way, you die. That's all they would do. They would just kill them and say they died in a car accident. And then what are you left with? You're left with Americans with their guns at home, certainly the ones that don't want to comply with government, which means then what? You get a knock on your door from somebody in fatigues. They say, have you taken the shots yet? While they're wearing some giant gas mask. You say, no, beat it. And then, of course, they look back at you and say, well, you're a danger to our health. You need to take these shots or you're not allowed to leave your property. And then again, individuals would be forced into taking them and then they would die. But then again, it begs the question, how many deaths before even those individuals in fatigues come to grips with what they're actually participating in? And then who do they turn their energy against? This is a massive, again, this was what they had planned. It's been written about at length from numerous individuals, and it couldn't be more obvious. It was certainly in the Q posts, there's no doubt about that, and again, endless books written about depopulation, and how exactly do you accomplish that? You accomplish it through lying to people, using television, radio, all forms of media, print, newspapers, etc., and you get people to believe something that isn't real so that they act on their own, in their own so-called best interests, when in fact it's just in the interests of government, and then we end up dead. So the only killing that was really going to happen in a form of self-defense would be somebody knocking on our door with a needle, with a loaded syringe, saying, take this or else. That's when the shooting would start. It had nothing to do with us going around and, saying, see that store owner over there? They won't let me in their stupid little store unless I wear a mask. Let's go kidnap them and kill them. I mean, that wasn't happening. People weren't doing that. They were quitting their jobs. They might have been getting in physical altercations, which clearly they were, with police officers when police officers, again, would attempt to remove somebody for not wearing a mask. We, of course, saw all of the physical confrontations between, complete strangers in stores, a number of things. People yelling at each other. We saw all of that. That was the tip of the iceberg, though. The long-term plan of what they had in store for all of us, essentially, was basically door-to-door shot taking at the end of a loaded gun. That's, again, when the shooting would have started. This next paragraph, again, all about children and schools. The availability of a vaccine, for all school-aged children might spur conspiracy theories, it says, and perceptions that schools will vaccinate children against parents' will and may increase the potential for violence. That happened. It flippin' happened. Schools gave kids COVID shots without their parents' knowledge and killed them. That happened. And parents sued, and parents won, whether their kid is dead or not. In September, a person suggested in an online post that medical workers administering the COVID-19 vaccine to school children were a legitimate target to attack, and questioned the difficulty in obtaining the medical workers' identifying information according to DHS information. That wasn't me. I certainly never did that. Again, this is hilarious. They're basically just creating these people to some extent and saying, well, we have information that says that a person was trying to do this. First of all, I wouldn't doubt it. I wouldn't doubt it that these so-called healthcare workers, which let's face it, they're not, that somebody would want them dead as a result of all of this and carrying out all of this nonsense blindly. Of course. Those people killed people. So, yeah, people are going to get mad when you kill their family members and kidnap them. It says DVEs might mobilize to violence in opposition to the vaccination mandates if there are widespread reports of individuals who refuse to be vaccinated losing their jobs, especially when occurring around year-end holidays. In addition, another spike in COVID-19 cases may lead to overcrowding in hospitals and spur DVE accusations that healthcare providers are not providing equitable care to unvaccinated people. And then it goes on and on. This document's hilarious. Again, definition again of domestic violent extremist, anti-government or anti-authority violent extremist, militia violent extremism, racially or ethnically motivated violent extremism. And then again, it gets very detailed here. Diverse socio-political factors amplifying persistent domestic violence extremist threat. And it goes right through multiple dates. It highlights again 2021 as being basically a huge year for when everybody was really pissed off, and rightfully so. And they mentioned just like a couple of cases. Some guy was arrested in Texas who intended to bomb a US-based business, believing that the business's data center provided services to federal agencies, including the FBI and the CIA. Okay, so they take, again, a couple of local whack jobs, and they basically say that this is, every single person who doesn't want a vaccine is one of these people. It's just nuts. But again, I find it funny, and they only highlight 4 individuals in this entire thing. Fatal domestic violent extremist acts in 2021. They only list 4. It says one guy killed 2 people, and they were targeting law enforcement. Another person killed 1 person, law enforcement. Another person killed 2 people, racial or ethnic minorities. And then another person killed 8 people, individuals fitting actors' personalized ideology. Okay, whatever. It's just bizarre. What an odd document. But again, they just lay out the truth in their own document while at the exact same time amplifying what we were kind of saying online and discussing face to face and on shows like this and everywhere else, endless publications. That government wants you dead. They always have. They want you brainwashed, stupid, fat, ugly, and dead. It's pretty simple. It's not complicated stuff. Whatever, government loves us. Well, take another one then. Take another shot, Skippy. See what happens. Now, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to stay on the jab train here. Last week, numerous doctors, a handful of them, testified in a Senate hearing specifically to Ron Johnson and others, having to do again with the impact of the bioweapon shots. And one of those individuals was Dr. James Thorpe. He is a gynecologist, if I'm not mistaken, reproductive doctor as well. And I want to play his testimony here, at least part of it. It's about 3 minutes and 50 seconds long, give or take. Again, this is the interesting part. And I've said this online, and I'll say it here as well. That time is arguably one of the best advocates for anybody who tells the truth. That when an individual tells the truth before the vast majority of individuals know or have even thought about it, it doesn't mean that that person is wrong. It just means that the other people haven't thought of it yet, or they're not thinking about it, or they don't want to think about it, which of course is a sign of ignorance. And then everything else. They rationalize the existence of a particular thing away and say, well, that has nothing to do with me and I don't care. And then they just dismiss it. But in their dismissal, they also, of course, as we know, don't hesitate to make fun of people. And they, of course, have made fun of me, they've made fun of you, they've made fun of anybody who knew what this was all about from the word go. And as a result of all of that, like I just said, time is the best advocate for a truth teller. Because here we are, 4 years later, after the jab rollout, certainly in the first portion of 2021, but, it's almost 5 years, coming up on 5 years now. But here we are, and there are Senate hearings now with medical doctors saying exactly what we were saying the shots were doing to people and going to do to people back then, and now they're saying it here again on the record in May of 2025. So, I hate to say I told you so, but I don't, because there will be I told you so's throughout this entire process for all of the jab takers and everybody else. Now again, I've met jab takers and individuals who have taken the shots, and they're very nice people. I'm talking about the unhinged individuals. I know that a lot of people even took these shots and they openly said it was a mistake. They fell for it. They shouldn't have. They've come to grips with it, and they said, it was terrible, and they're even injured by it in some cases, and in some cases, thank God they're not. But even so, this message is more for, again, the willfully ignorant, the individuals that just are immovable on this subject and still believe that all of these shots are actually a good thing. So here's Dr. James Thorpe in 3, 2, 1.
This deception was institutionalized in the now infamous Shimabukuro study published on April 21st, 2021 in the digital version of the New England Journal of Medicine. 21 authors claimed the miscarriage rate was 12.6%, but the raw data revealed an 82% miscarriage rate in women vaccinated during the first trimester. This figure mirrors the effects of chemical abortion drugs such as RU-486. Also, in the same journal edition, on the same day, an op-ed appeared by CDC Director Rochelle Walensky and Journal Editor-in-Chief Eric Rubin. These publications were riddled with conflicts of interest and deliberate misrepresentations intended to coerce pregnant women into taking vaccines. Subsequent studies have also claimed that COVID-19 vaccines are safe and effective during pregnancy and have been rebuked by respected researchers. These publications are fundamentally compromised by serious conflicts of interest, ranging from biased funding sources and institutional mandates, and even threats to their medical licenses and board certifications. Between 2020 and 2022, pharmaceutical companies paid $1.06 billion to reviewers at leading medical journals, the New England Journal of Medicine, JAMA, Lancet, and BMJ, thus corrupting the peer review process. At least 6 existing studies, 3 from CDC, FDA, and 2 from Pfizer, revealed major breaches in safety signals for COVID-19 vaccines and pregnancy. These findings were ignored. Conversely, countless independent researchers with no conflicts of interest published findings that contradicted the false narratives and the pharmaceutical industry narratives, only to be rewarded by persecution, censorship, and threats to their medical licenses and board certifications. This is not hypothetical. It happened to me. On February 8th, 2025, our team of researchers published a peer-reviewed study in Science, Public Health Policy, and the Law. We identified 37 adverse pregnancy outcomes significantly associated with COVID-19 vaccine, including miscarriage, stillbirth, birth defects, cervical insufficiency, premature rupture of membranes, preterm birth, and death of the newborn. Lin and colleagues in a major journal publication documented that the COVID-19 vaccine traverses the placenta, enters the fetal blood, and bioactively produces spike protein in the placenta and the lining of the uterus. Recently, animal studies revealed the mRNA COVID vaccine causes the destruction of 60% of the ovarian reserve in rats. This catastrophic public health failure was financed with taxpayer dollars and channeled through federal agencies to medical gatekeepers such as the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, ACOG, the American Board of Obstetrics and Gynecology, ABOG, and the Society for Maternal Fetal Medicine, SMFM. These organizations have abandoned their ethics and responsibilities to physicians and patients and must be held accountable. I urge the government to immediately halt all funding to these entities and to end every promotional campaign that coerces or recommends experimental mRNA therapies to pregnant women. This must stop now. Thank you.
Again, not tooting my own horn here. I'm simply saying that this right here is why sophistry doesn't work. I'm not a medical doctor, and I said that publicly, or at least part of it, publicly on the record 4 years ago. James Thorpe didn't say that publicly 4 years ago. He did say it eventually. He came out in, I believe it was Died Suddenly, the documentary, and he ultimately ended up saying it, which was, again, great. But that right there should prove it to people. You don't have to be a medical doctor to know the truth about particular things. You just have to be literate. All you have to do is read. Again, it doesn't hurt that my background is in health education, anatomy, and physiology. That certainly helped me, I would say. But even so, that right there should prove it. Well, what does he know? He's not a medical doctor. Well, go to hell. It doesn't have anything to do with anything. So again, I find it fascinating, and I find it a good thing that this is happening again on the record. Even though these testimonies are happening, the mainstream media, of course, as we know, never picks this up. Anybody who watches the mainstream media wouldn't even know that this just occurred. That this hearing, rather, just actually happened last week. Lawyers, medical doctors, you name it. Again, even, what's his name? Peter McCullough was there. Even Peter McCullough was discussing a great deal of this as well. The problem, of course, with Peter McCullough, and where this, of course, doesn't go far enough, is that COVID doesn't exist. There is no virus. There's nothing floating around in the air. He, of course, continues to perpetuate this. And he doesn't think that even bringing that up is relevant or important. It most certainly is. There is no COVID. Never has been. But again, he believes in the different variants and says, well, natural immunity became a thing, so everybody was fine, whether you were jabbed or you weren't, and there was no need for this and no need for that. I mean, okay, there's half-truths in what he's saying. But again, you got to take it a step further. He's a big, Peter McCullough, bless his heart, I mean, he's a big spoon bender. He's always bending the spoon, when in fact he should just realize there is no spoon. That all of this, again, was brought about by cranking on 5G, turning it up to the max, and again, just fear, and of course, injections, and then the injections shedding on people via electromagnetism because of course, gain of function, which is exactly what gain of function means. You're gaining the function of a transmissible vaccine from person to person through electromagnetism. That's it. And now, again, you have more stories on a day-in and day-out basis now, actually more now than ever, certainly in rapid succession here, having to do with numerous shots, including the flu shot. This was from Slay News. Federal court, flu vaccines cause Guillain-Barré syndrome. Of course they do. Flu shots kill people, which means if you can die, you can also survive and have endless other symptoms as a result. You're alive, but you're just loaded with a particular symptom or multiple symptoms of being ill because, of course, you've been poisoned. Again, this came out in a particular court. Let me see here. The ruling was issued by U.S. Court of Federal Claims. The court sided with Alan Lean of Wisconsin, who had suffered life-changing injuries caused by a flu shot. He was awarded $500,000 in damages for his vaccine-induced injury. Marks a significant ruling under the National Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. Judgment follows Lean's diagnosis of Guillain-Barré syndrome. The court determined that Lean's GBS was caused by a flu shot received in October of 2019. October of 2019. A flu shot in October of 2019. When were people claiming they had quote-unquote COVID for the first time? The fall of 2019. So how did they obtain it? Injections, flu shots, and other flu shots. I'm telling you, the COVID juice was in the flu shots in 2019. And this, again, has been discussed, and I think this court case pretty much narrows that window right to that time spot right there. Represented by attorney Randy Knudsen of the Knudsen Casey law firm, Lean filed his petition in October of 2021. The vaccine court ruled in February of 2023 that Lean was entitled to compensation. A final settlement agreed upon in March of 2025 provides a lump sum payment to cover damages. Yes. And this right here actually leads me to the MAHA report assessment. Make Our Children Healthy Again. This is an incredible document. I've put it on the government documents tab on my website. It's 70 some odd pages long, about 72 pages, I believe. And 72, 73. Anyway, it really is very well done. It's well put together. And one of the points that Robert Kennedy Jr. makes, and he's been making it for years, and he even made it most recently on CNN with Caitlin Collins, who is arguably one of the dumbest things on the face of the planet. But anyway, he openly says again that the amount of money that is wasted throughout time as a result of, again, poor health, even stretches into things like patient advocacy. And that because of all of these sick people that we have, because of all of the poisoning that's been going on for generation after generation after generation, that all of these other groups exist, of course, that quote-unquote advocate for patients. Well, they wouldn't be advocating for them, and they wouldn't be taking money from patients either, if, again, these patients were healthy and they weren't being poisoned. So it's like a flow chart and a Venn diagram sort of all wrapped into one, that you have these other organizations that only exist because sick people exist. And then if you didn't have sick people, then those sick people wouldn't be spending more money on having these organizations represent them, either legally or otherwise. And then as a result of, again, just people being healthier and us not being poisoned by government intentionally, to, of course, raise the costs of everything and make us so sick that we're bankrupt and in debt all of the time, which, of course, benefits government, not us, that, again, if people were just healthy, all of that would go away. And that's 100% true. It's basically the collateral damage as a result of a person being unhealthy. Yes, you're a sick patient for the rest of your life, but also, again, all of the hoops that you have to jump through as a so-called sick person are being built around these sick people on purpose to, again, siphon money out of them ultimately. Whether it's, again, through taxes or extra fees or whatever it may be. But again, I've linked that entire document on my website under the Government Documents tab. I highly recommend taking a look at it. It really is fascinating. Again, spends a great deal on youth and American youth. It talks about, again, the overabundance of the over-medicalization of youth in particular, which we know that of course means shot taking, and a number of other things. Again, it goes into food, it goes into obesity, it covers numerous topics. It's a fantastic document, well put together, and yeah, bravo on that one. Now, let me mention this too. This is kind of a human experiment and certainly rather an interesting one. And I want to play just a little piece of audio from this and then discuss a few things and then play or read rather, Dr. Mackes's response to this. Scott Adams, the cartoonist for Dilbert, and I used to read Dilbert a lot and laugh my ass off because, again, when it came to workplace dynamics, he's 100% right on the way that it all breaks down and the lack of communication and the full-blown stupidity of people who run institutions. That's why I liked it. Anyway, Scott Adams is basically, I would call him a denialist, and I would call him sort of a self-important denialist right to the bitter end. And he, of course, claims that he's dying as a result of pancreatic cancer that has now spread to his bones. He continues to deny treatment and deny the truth and deny multiple forms of treatment at the exact same time. He also claims that he has taken ivermectin and did so for about a month and then said it didn't do anything. Of course, Dr. Mackes then replies to him and says, hey, look, you're not supposed to just take it for a month. You're supposed to take it with other things for a longer period of time. But again, when Scott Adams, whatever it was, a week or so ago, came out and told everybody that he had terminal cancer and might not make it to the end of the year, a lot of people were like, whatever, don't care. But even so, at the very end of his so-called life here, he's still criticizing these so-called anti-vaxxers. He's still criticizing us. And he's saying, I mean, he's, of course, openly said, I believe it was a year ago or so, he said, I don't know how long I'm going to be around, and if I get sick and I just randomly die, well, then, yeah, it could be the shots, but who's to say? Now, we know, of course, that he got cancer as a result of taking the shots. Again, his cancer came on slowly. He's had it for quite some time, and it's gotten worse over time. The point is, and the interesting human behavior aspect of this is his stubbornness. He's going to be this bold-headed and hard-headed, rather, right to the bitter end. The cures for cancer exist. They're out there. And of course, what does he do? He makes fun of people by claiming such things and saying such things, and he calls them, he calls them all kinds of names. He basically says, well, you're just going to spread mud on yourself and all this other stuff. In fact, I'm just going to skip it and just get right to his audio. Give Scott Adams a listen here regarding some of this, and again, his open criticism and his still existing criticism about the people who are right and people who know more than he does. And then I'll read you Dr. Mackes's response to Scott Adams, of course, publicly discussing this. So here's Scott Adams in 3, 2, 1.
I'm going to give you a vague update on my health situation. Most of you are up to date. You know that I have a fatal form of cancer, prostate that has metastasized to my bones. So in theory, if I didn't do anything, and it's sort of incurable, so there's not much you can do, I would be dead pretty soon. However, I have decided on a path of treatment that I'm not going to tell you about. Now, it has to do with real doctors. It's not going to be me grazing in my backyard and rubbing mud on myself like most of you are recommending. I'm not going to be taking ivermectin. I'm not going to be spending more time in the sun. I'm sure all those are good things, but I don't believe any of them would make me better. I think somebody would have noticed if you could cure incurable cancers with, just sort of minor diet changes and things like that. So the reason I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to do is because I know what the reaction would be. Somebody would tell me I'm crazy and, I should eat mud and do some damn thing. And so the goodwill that I experienced for the last several days, which has been really good, like unbelievably kind and generous, started to turn today. So now the anti-vaxxers came out, and I knew that was going to happen. The anti-vaxxers came out, and they're asking, did you get the cancer after you got the vaccination? And these are just terrible people. Now, I'm not even saying that it's the wrong question. What I'm saying is it's not the right question for you. Might be a question for a doctor, might be a good question for a researcher, might be a good question for me. But It's not what you should be speculating on. And by the way, if you go to Grok or some AI, you'll find out that there's no known connection. At least that's what the official word is. But so I won't tell you what I'm doing, but I'll tell you that my odds of survival, just because I've picked a path that most of you have never heard of. All right. So if you're saying to yourself, I wonder if it's X, no, because you've heard of it. If you say, I wonder if it's Y, it isn't, because you've heard of that. So only a very few of you would have ever even heard of the path I'm taking. But it's with top doctors. It's not something I'm making up. It's not some little thing I'm doing on my own. It's with top doctors in the field who know a lot about this. And it looks like my odds of survival may have jumped from 0 to something closer to 30%, which means don't do my funeral yet. I've got a solid 30% chance of getting on the other side of this. And by the way, this is brand new. This is information that I was not aware of until just recently. So I will give you updates at some point, but not until I know if it's working, which actually won't take long. So in a matter of, I don't know, a month or so, I should have a pretty good idea if it's working. But I'll let you know.
His capacity for denial is second to none. I mean, it's amazing to me. He hasn't learned a thing. Over a year ago, he was talking about having cancer and being ill. I remember him bringing it up a year ago. So it's not even a new thing. He's claiming, of course, now that it's gotten worse and whatever else. Okay, fine. But claiming that there's no connection between the shots and cancer because Grok AI said so, according to him, he's lying. He's just lying. Again, this is where a person's over-reliance on AI is going to be their downfall. So here's the question I just asked Grok. Is there a correlation with taking the COVID shots and getting cancer? It says, short answer, there is no credible scientific evidence establishing a causal link or significant correlation between receiving COVID-19 vaccines and an increased risk of developing cancer. Studies and monitoring data from health authorities worldwide indicate that the vaccines are safe and do not promote cancer development. And then it goes on and on and on and on. Now, do you believe that? Of course not. There's ample evidence, again, that that is the case, that individuals took the shots, got a cancer diagnosis, died. On a wide range of timelines, I might add. Some people, again, were taking the shots, getting diagnosed a week later, dying a day later. It was happening that fast. Hence the phrase turbo cancers. This is not a new thing. But again, this should prove to people that Scott Adams lives in his own head. He thinks he's got it all figured out all the time. That's his downfall. And he lies loudest when he lies to himself. And then, of course, he puts it on display for everybody to see. On camera. On his, video podcasting streaming thing. And that's about it. It's embarrassing. Even again, right to the bitter end, he's going to deny anything and everything all of the time. I'm not going to listen to those people. They're not doctors. I'm talking to real doctors. Okay, whatever you say. Here's Dr. Makis's response. Because again, a lot of people were reaching out to Scott Adams and saying, you need to get a hold of Dr. Makis. And then, of course, Scott Adams was on X replying back and saying, well, stop telling me to get a hold of Dr. Makis and this, that, and the other. And again, I think I said it previously on the show. If I didn't, I'll repeat myself, that I sent Scott Adams, just like I send anybody, the link to the Amazon link to the book, The 1 Minute Cure. And in that book, again, it lays out a regimen for taking food-grade hydrogen peroxide in water over the course of, again, months. You build up. It's like 1 drop. Again, I'm going to get the measurements wrong, but it's like 1 drop in 8 ounces of water, and you drink that, and then the next day you have 2, and the next day you have 3. and you work your way up to where you're again drinking multiple drops of food-grade percentage hydrogen peroxide in water. Because again, oxygen is the thing that kills cancer cells. If you increase oxygen, then you increase killer T cells and you increase everything else in your body that fights off infection and fights off abnormal cells that don't have oxygen in them, which is what cancer is, and then it goes away. So yeah, there's lots of different cures and there's lots of different things that people can take at the same time. But to be so dismissive to people, again, who are helping him and people who might know better, that's where you end up losing the answer. And you end up grasping at straws, or, you surround yourself with people in lab coats and think you've got it all figured out. So anyway, here's Dr. Makis's response. He said the following, quote, "I followed Scott Adams in 2016 and found his insights into the U.S. presidential race fascinating. He called the 2016 election correctly, predicting that Donald Trump would win. He was one of the very few who had it right. So I was pleasantly surprised when Scott approached me in October of 2024 for help with a serious health condition. Of course, I agreed to help. Fast forward to May 19th of 2025, Scott let the world know that he had terminal stage 4 prostate cancer, metastatic, I'm saying that right, to bones, metastasized to bones. And he tried ivermectin and fenbendazole with my assistance, and that didn't work. He followed up with a May 22nd, 2025 tweet that again mentions my name, and he has it pinned. It now has 2.3 million views. Since Scott's May 19th, 2025 video, my Twitter account has been flooded with hundreds of negative messages, attacks, threats, smears, and I've had to block hundreds of Twitter accounts to protect myself from the tsunami of abuse. As they said, no good deed goes unpunished. So what exactly happened? Scott's story is tragic. He's been repeatedly betrayed by modern medicine. Let me explain. Scott took COVID-19 vaccines. He trusted his doctors who would have assured him they were safe and effective. You can count that as a life-changing betrayal. Since then, Scott has made it very clear that those who didn't take the COVID-19 vaccines made the right choice and didn't have to worry about impacts of the jabs on their health. It is probable that he suffered bodily injury as a result of the jabs. Scott was then betrayed by his oncologists. It is clear that his prostate cancer was not treated properly. Prostate cancer patients can live many years, even decades, without progression, with the proper cancer treatment. I don't know what prostate cancer treatment Scott took, who his oncologists were, or which cancer center he was treated at. But they failed to stop Scott's cancer from progressing rapidly to a terminal stage, quote unquote, in a short period of time. In addition to failing to treat his cancer properly, Scott's oncologist lied to him repeatedly. First, he told Scott that ivermectin wouldn't work, even though he had no way to know whether it would or wouldn't. Second, he told Scott that he had a 0% chance of survival and would die shortly. I wish Scott had told us the name of his oncologist and the name of the cancer center he was treated at, so that other cancer patients would avoid them and save themselves from harm. Unfortunately, he hasn't given us these names. Instead, he has given the world my name for reasons I don't understand. I have never been Scott's doctor. I was his health coach, very briefly. Our health coaching relationship lasted 1.5 months, at which point Scott left, period. Scott supposedly tried ivermectin and fenbendazole for a total of 1 month. Scott never completed my ivermectin protocol, which is a minimum of 3 months with follow-up blood work and imaging. So we will never know if ivermectin and fenbendazole would have worked for him or not. Trying it for 1 month and then stopping is not sufficient to make any sort of conclusion. It is the equivalent of doing 1 chemo cycle, stopping, and declaring chemo doesn't work. It takes approximately 3 months to see significant changes in blood cancer markers and imaging. During that time, PSA may go up due to cancer cell killing and release of cancer antigens. So for the hundreds of Twitter posts which had the same identical language, quote, he tried, it didn't work, unquote, all of these posts were entirely false. Scott didn't try ivermectin and fenbendazole in any proper shape or form, then we will never know if it would have worked for him or not. As for one final betrayal of modern medicine, Scott was told he has a 0% chance of survival and would die in the next few months. This is an absurd lie from an oncologist. There were many options still available for Scott. I could list them. I'm going to interrupt real quick. I think that Scott Adams is so delusional and loaded to the brim with Munchausen syndrome that he would actually, again, deny real forms of treatment just for the purpose of dying, just to make his point. I'm not kidding. I actually think that he's one of these people, so that in death, he would actually still say, I told you so. As if to say, see, these things didn't work. I mean, again, the mental illness there is astounding. He goes on, Makis does, he says, why Scott's oncologist lied to him repeatedly, I do not know. He said Scott is trying an experimental treatment with real doctors, quote unquote, is now trying that, which apparently increases his chance of survival from 0 to 30%. It sounds like yet another lie from what are presumably American oncologists working either on an mRNA cancer vaccine or some type of expensive immune-stimulating infusion. See, this is where Makis can read between the lines. And I think Makis is right about this. It wouldn't shock me if Adams, again, was taking more shots to cure his cancer. Which, again, I hate to laugh. It isn't going to happen. That's not going to work. He goes on, he says, I strongly suspect once we find out what this treatment is, we will also find out it is very expensive. Will it just happen to be ready for market rollout? Modern medicine has betrayed Scott over and over and over. Modern medicine has damaged and possibly destroyed Scott's health. Scott's doctors have repeatedly lied to him while failing to treat him properly. And yet, amidst all of this betrayal of modern medicine, Scott doesn't give us his doctors' names or the names of the cancer center that failed to treat him properly. Instead, he has my name pinned with 2.3 million views. I don't regret helping Scott Adams. I can sleep well at night. You can help someone only to the degree that they want to be helped. Exactly. Presumably, all the doctors who have harmed Scott can sleep well at night too, having been amply compensated for selling pharmaceutical products that have brought Scott nothing but harm to his health. They will go on to harm others, as they have not been exposed publicly. Scott's betrayal by modern medicine is a cautionary tale. I took some important lessons from this experience. I hope you did too. I wish Scott Adams nothing but the best. May he beat his stage 4 cancer, despite modern medicine's best efforts to prevent him from doing so. Good luck, Scott, unquote. That's well said. Again, he's clearly telling the truth, and we can read between the lines also. We know Scott took the COVID shots. He publicly said so numerous times. He criticized the people who didn't. He criticized the individuals who had this shit figured out a long time ago. Made fun of us for calling us pseudo-doctors and, I don't know, conspiracy theorists and all these other names. No, we're just literate. We're literate. We're not stuck in our own heads thinking that we've got it all figured out all the time. We know that we know nothing. That's why we're still alive. That's the whole point. So again, people have to get out of their own way. If I was hit with a cancer diagnosis, I would immediately start reading, researching, and doing my own thing immediately. I have the materials here in my own home, of course, that could potentially cure it. I would want blood tests. I would want somebody to see if there was progress being made certainly in a positive direction. But again, getting online and making fun of people for trying to help. That just means that throughout this entire time, he hasn't learned a thing. So, yeah, I personally believe, again, that he's just going to continue down this path no matter what and blame people no matter what, all while, of course, looking terrible on camera for everybody to see and then playing the victim the entire time. I mean, that's what a leftist does. That's what, again, an individual who is ill would certainly do. Just constantly blame everybody else instead of taking personal responsibility for it. Because remember, an AI system says it, so it must be true. Again, you can ask AI systems legal questions. When you start getting into medicine, that's where the AI system falls short. That's where it crumbles in on itself, and it exposes itself as having an agenda. So that's my 2 cents on the whole thing. Again, pretty amazing. Why would Scott Adams even reach out to Dr. Makis after all? Why would he even reach out to him of all people? Dr. Makis is only on the scene because he knows that shots cause cancer. So for Scott Adams to then turn around and say there's no correlation between shot taking and cancer whatsoever, then why would you reach out to the guy who exposed it in the first place? These kinds of people, again, they lie loudest when they lie to themselves. Not sure what else to say. Okay. I want to end with this. It's graduation season, ladies and gentlemen. High school graduations, college graduations, kindergarten graduations. Yes, that's a real thing. Let me do this. Let me paint this picture here. The local high school, of course, had their graduation with a dark cloud of pedophilia over top of the entire town. Now, having given some presentations in the past, and certainly planned out presentations to give, a graduation, and certainly a high school and or college graduation, is one that you would want to plan very specifically. Because there are a lot of people, of course, who take it very seriously. It's a bookend to an individual's life to some extent, a springboard to other things, however a person wants to characterize it. So, first of all, the weather. When it comes to a presentation like a graduation, you always, of course, make the determination of weather. What is the weather going to do? Well, as it turns out, here in Southwest Ohio, it's been raining and windy for quite some time. It's been a rather wet month of May. A bit unusual, I suppose, but, whatever. It changes from year to year, and it is the way that it is. If there's a chance of rain, even a chance of rain, for a graduation, what do you think you're supposed to do? Do you have graduation outside, or do you have graduation inside? Knowing full well that you can do both. You typically would have it inside. A smart person would say, we're going to have it inside. We're not even going to take the chance of it raining and have it outside. Not to mention, the temperatures here have been, I would say, somewhere in the 60s, and certainly on that particular day, it was hovering in the 50s. Cloudy, 50s, windy, rain. They, of course, decided to have this outside. They decided to have it not under a tent of any kind, but right in the middle of the football field, which is an AstroTurf football field. So as the presentation was going on, let me again just paint the picture. I don't expect anybody to watch any of this. Again, you don't have to. And I haven't seen a high school graduation in its entirety probably since I graduated from high school back in 1999. So I'm not interested, again, in watching high school graduations, but I just want to paint the picture because I want you to picture this unprofessionalism in your own minds. There is a small stage that exists. Again, I don't know on what yard line of the football field it was, but it was in the middle of the football field. To the right of the stage and not on the stage, you have a band, a very small band, and you have a very small choir, made up of maybe like 8 students, some graduating, some not. And then you have a very small graduating class, which of course is in seats, sitting in seats in 2 separate sections with the row down the middle and the whole thing. On the stage, you have flags waving, or banners, whatever they were. You have the superintendent of schools, Ed Thoreau, wearing a black suit, and he looks like he's at a funeral. And then you have the president of the school board, Rebecca Howard, who isn't dressed professionally in the slightest and looks like she's wearing a coat which looks like it was made from a 1960s couch cushion. And then you have the principal of the high school, Scott Davey, who's sitting there again, separate from the two of them. And then that's it. That's all the people that are on stage. Everybody else is either standing on the side over by a fence or, again, behind or to the left or right of the graduating class, basically up against the bleachers. And there's bleachers on both sides, of course, of the football field. And this is, again, how the entire thing transpires. There is also, again, one student who is in a wheelchair. And this individual, again, unfortunately, is severely handicapped, but apparently has graduated. With that said, that individual's name, their last name starts with a B. And here's why I'm bringing this up. This is where the diversity, equity, and inclusion hypocrisy shines brightest. I even wrote about this in my second book, where there are schools, in particular, there were local schools, that quite literally have prom dances just for handicapped students. That you would have a prom dance for the quote-unquote normals, and then you have a separate prom dance just for the mentally and physically handicapped. I can't think of anything more bigoted and discriminatory than that. And that right there, again, should highlight, again, the diversity, equity, and inclusion fallacy for everybody. So the reason I mention this particular student, so to speak, or this individual, is because their last name starts with a B. And they, of course, introduce and seat everyone alphabetically. So everybody receives, again, their diplomas alphabetically. When do you think this person, who happens to be in a wheelchair, the only one in a wheelchair, when in the order do you think that they received their diploma? Was it alphabetically or did it come another time? If you picked another time, you would be correct. They gave it to him last. They gave it to him last. They rolled him up on the stage. Again, that looked a little iffy, like the stage wouldn't even hold his mechanical, motorized wheelchair. And then they started to roll him off, and honest to God, it looked like they were going to drop him. And I thought, well, this would be a horrible end to everything. And fortunately, he didn't fall, and they didn't drop him. But it looked a little touch and go there when they were rolling him down the ramp. Again, I'm bringing this up because the optics of the entire thing were terrible. It looked like, again, one of the worst graduation put together things that I've ever seen in my entire life. It was just poorly done. They could have done it in the gymnasium. They could have spent $8,000 even. They could have done it in the gymnasium for free, which is a nice gym. It's brand new, practically. They could have, again, with bleachers on both sides of the gymnasium. Ample seating for all participants. It's not, it's not complicated. They could have even rented out Millett Hall at Miami University, which is where the basketball team plays. They could have spent $8,000 to do that. Did they do that? No. They just decided, well, we're going to have it outside, rain or shine. You don't do that. You just don't do that. You don't say, we're going to have it outside, rain or shine. You just say, we're going to have it inside. Because that's the thing to do. You don't have it outside because other schools are having theirs on the football field outside. And that's some kind of a trend nationwide right now. Again, these people are incapable of an original thought, and they're incapable of common sense. Two more criticisms. Number one, and it might sound superficial, but it matters, believe it or not, certainly from an optics standpoint. The superintendent and the president of the school board here in town have EDDs, okay? They have an educational doctorate. It's lazy, but whatever. They have an EDD, which means they have an academic robe. They own an academic robe. That's what you're supposed to wear at a graduation. If you have an advanced degree and you work for a school district, you're supposed to wear the academic robe. It's just kind of a thing. It's just what you do. You're not showing off. You're not being braggadocious. It's just what you do. But what you don't do is wear a cartoon 1960s couch cushion as a coat or dress like you're at a funeral. You don't do those two things. And what you also do is you put everybody on stage who can be on a stage, which means you make the stage big enough to accommodate everybody. You have a massive stage. You have administrators. You have teachers who want to be up there potentially. You have, again, all district officials up there. You make it look like a college graduation as much as possible. So again, that's kind of the first major criticism beyond the other ones I just mentioned, that, again, from an optics standpoint, it just looks bad. It looks like you're not including everybody. What happened to the inclusion aspect? You don't want to include people anymore? So there was that. I should mention this as a sidebar, during the downpour, which it started to rain halfway through, which was kind of funny. And again, if you've ever seen it rain on AstroTurf, you know that you're basically walking on a giant sponge. So everybody has soaking wet feet, regardless of what shoes you're wearing. You're soaking wet. And the high heels, of course, are plunging into the AstroTurf, which is going to be replaced anyway, but even so, you're ruining your football field. So congratulations on that one. That's $500,000 down the drain. On top of that, and yeah, it costs $500,000 to replace these high school AstroTurf fields. It's asinine. Back in the day, they would just have locals, plant grass, and that would be it. But somebody read a paper somewhere along the way that said that these rubber fields are, easier for injury or something along those lines. I mean, my God, these people are crazy. But anyway, beyond all of that, of course, and wanting to include everybody, one of the microphones went out when it was pouring down rain, and that was hilarious because you just heard this woman screaming the students' names instead of just saying it into a microphone that actually worked, which again, having given presentations, you always make sure that you have backup technology, that if something breaks, you can immediately replace it instantly. So that, again, the transition from a broken to a functioning piece of technology is almost seamless. They didn't think of that, but they ultimately ended up getting it fixed, and that was that. But it was hilarious what happened as a result of it not getting fixed. On top of that, again, from an optics standpoint, the principal, Scott Davey, gave a speech that I would say was 2/3 negative and 2/3 negative toward anybody who criticizes the school. I'm not joking. I mean, it was almost like he was speaking directly to me, like he was speaking directly to anybody else who criticizes the school district whatsoever, or raises questions, or asks questions, or what have you. He said something like, some people just want to hate for the sake of hating. It's like, bro, no one's hating for the sake of hating. It's called evidence, and the massive cloud of pedophilia and unethical behavior that exists around your entire school district. And what's funny is that he, of all people, shouldn't throw stones when they live in a glass house, because rumor has it he's cheated on his wife with at least one school employee. And he actually mentions this individual's name as a thank you among other school employees that he wanted to thank at the beginning of that particular speech. So Scott Davey would do well to keep his mouth closed and not give moral and ethical advice to anybody. But that right there again, I think, exemplifies the entire behavior of a great deal of people who work in this business. It's not all of them, but it is many of them. Again, no one has the ability to say stop, no, and don't. They just don't do it. All of the people, again, responsible for any kind of a graduation ceremony, whatever it is, no one looked at anybody and said, you know what, it's going to rain, it's going to be cold, people are going to be uncomfortable, let's just have it inside. Let's just do that. They didn't do that. Let's just spend $8,000 and have it at Millett Hall at Miami University, like we have last year and almost every single year. Nope, they don't want to do that either. I don't know what point they think they're trying to make, but they're making themselves look like terrible managers all of the time with really zero effort. I mean, it really doesn't take any effort from anybody on the outside. If anybody has any powers of perception, you can clearly see that this is the case. But I find the entire graduation thing, certainly in this day and age, to be, well, how would I characterize it? Laughable. It's just laughable. Down south, or in these predominantly, these HBCs, historically black colleges, you've got the graduating ceremonies where, again, they're doing backflips on stage. They're doing slave dances. They're rapping. They're throwing their hats up in the air, tipping chairs over, shaking their asses, twerking, doing the whole thing. There's endless footage of that taking place all of the time. And then, of course, you have the exact opposite where none of that happens. But then you have, more mild, I would say, and less obvious examples of stupidity with how they're planned and how they're poorly coordinated. So it's embarrassing. It's just embarrassing. They have one thing to do, and that's to look clean and professional and have it snappy and make everything work, and that's it. And when one thing caves in, if anybody criticizes them, well, then there's something wrong with the criticizer, not the actual ceremony itself. Again, no one said no. No one said this is a bad idea. It's going to rain. It's going to be cold. Everybody's feet are going to get wet. This is going to be terrible. We're setting ourselves up to have this look bad. What if the stage breaks? What if, something tips over? This, that, and the other. Again, no one, even when it came to dress code, no one said that's a bad look, that's a bad idea. Because no one's thinking. So they have apparently no problem spending $100,000 on a Title IX investigation. But they have a problem apparently spending $8,000 on an indoor graduation ceremony at a place of a university setting where they've always had it year after year after year. This is the mind frame of these people. So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, again, happy Memorial Day, and I'll catch you on Wednesday. Peace. Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.